Vercel or Netlify. So Sitecore is moving into that world as well. It's a big change for Sitecore. So basically, in the end, what you're going to have is that Sitecore will provide basic services like CMS and presentation. And Sitecore is also investing in the separate services, which are composable, so you can either use it or not use them. So Sitecore provides separate products for personalization, which will be integrated can be integrated into Sitecore as well. And all of this would be in the cloud, and you would more look like a SaaS than a PaaS model that you have now. So in terms of how it's going to look from an architecture point of view, what you're going to have is that you will have a Sitecore CMS in the cloud that you will use to manage your content and presentation, and then you will have an API endpoint which will be hosted in the cloud. It would be very scalable. It would be cached, and it would be expose your content through GraphQL. And then this content would be consumed by Vercel Next.js applications. But it could be not XJS, but Vercel is like a preferred option by Sitecore, like a recommended option. And it would be hosted on Vercel and Netlify, which is basically like an edge hosting for Next.js, which means it would be very scalable already. Out of the box would be scaled to all the different regions around the world and pre-cached for that. So it's very, very high performance hosting. So I'll just would like to do some small demo on this Sitecore cloud. Has anyone used Sitecore Headless or Sitecore GSS?
GSS.
Yeah. So I'll just do a little bit intro on how it's gonna look like from XM Cloud point of view. So you have the portal here, and you have a number of projects that basically like a Sitecore instance. Each project represents a Sitecore instance, and you have your environments here with number of sites that you can create, and then you have a GraphQL endpoint here. You can access the content editor for that Sitecore instance. So it's very similar experience to what you have currently, but it will be all hosted in the cloud as a SaaS. It's all based on Sitecore GSS, which is basically you will have like a React application that will use some of the will have GSS renderings on the pages. So going back to this diagram, so you basically have this is like a Sitecore in the CMS in the cloud that you have here, and then this is Experience Edge. So it's basically whenever you publish your content on the same cloud, it goes. You don't have a CD instance. So instead of CD instance, you have Experience Edge, which is more like a CDN. You should think of it more like a CDN that has already pre-cached content. So it doesn't process the requests like you have in the usual, usually with CD servers. But in this case, it's more like you probably publish the content. It pre-processes the layout that you have on the pages, and then publishes that into that Experience Edge endpoint, which speed up things, but it's also gives some limitations of what you can do and how you should build your website. So I'll just do a quick preview of how the GraphQL would look like. So basically, GraphQL is like a protocol that you can use to query your CMS. So here you can have, you can basically query Sitecore content. You can do simple queries like with ID path, but you can also do more complex search query based on the fields and then it will be consumed by the Next.js app that will use that content to build the website presentation on the front end. So in terms of benefits of migration to GSS and Headless and XMCloud in general, one thing that we noticed is that if you're using Jamstack, if you're using Jamstack application, your amount of traffic that your Sitecore instance gets is really decreased by a lot. So a lot of processing that is done happens on the Vercel, which is much cheaper in terms of pricing and much faster because it's being hosted on the edge, which means like instead of actually processing on your server hosted somewhere, it is processed on the edge endpoint, which is, you can think of it more like a CDN because it's very, very heavily cached. Another improvement is the performance. So again, because it's hosted on the edge and it is statically generated. So with Next.js, you can statically generate your site. It will be built, it will retrieve the content and then the build website beforehand, before actually serving the request. So when someone serves the request, 90% of the time, it will serve them the statically generated content, just plain markup. So imagine how fast it will be. It will be like 5 millisecond, 10 millisecond response time sometimes. So in the end, your lighthouse scores that you get in your browser would be like very, very like 100% performance scores, which is good for SEO, obviously. And then the third benefit of moving is like the spending on infrastructure, which basically counts for the first two, is because you have less traffic, you have much better performance, you spend much less time on serving the requests. The amount of infrastructure you need to keep the high performance application is much smaller. So your spending bill at the end would be like 2 or 3 times smaller. And also the scalability, like if you think like you start from end requests and how easy it is to start from end request and move to 10 times request. And then this with Headless and with XMCloud, you shouldn't worry about that because Experience Edge already does that. You already have an endpoint with GraphQL, and Sitecore handles all the scalability, all the scalability. So whatever number of requests you're doing, it will cover that. So all you need is just to host that on Next.js and Vercel, which also does handles the scalability as well on their own. But that's not all. Also think about the upgrades. So if you're hosting your own Sitecore instance on the cloud, you still need to go through the upgrade process, which sometimes could take a lot of time. You know, like how big this upgrade sometimes it can take 3 months, 2 months, depends on the version. And then with XMCloud, Sitecore handles all the upgrades. So you shouldn't worry about that. It's all SaaS. And they also handles the hosting. So all you need to worry about is authoring the content. And also the architecture is with Next.js and XMCloud is very simplified as well. So basically, Sitecore acts as a CMS which is responsible only for authoring the content and creating the presentation by content authors, and the actual front end is all located in Next.js application, which means also that how fast you can deploy and ship your new changes to your front end, because all you need to do is to push your Next.js app, and it will take probably like 10 seconds or something like that. It's very fast with Vercel, which also speed up, obviously, the development time for teams. But it all comes with a cost. Basically, if you migrate from Sitecore on premises, on the cloud, if you migrate from PaaS model to SaaS model, there are certain functionality which wouldn't exist in XM Cloud. So think of XM Cloud as XM hosted as SaaS, which basically wouldn't have the functionality of Sitecore XP that you have at the moment. But it also has some other limitations as well. So you will lose some functionality, you will have to replace it with alternatives, which some of them would be provided by Sitecore. And also you will have less control over your Sitecore instance. So it would be a different way of management that. So a lot of it would be handled by Sitecore itself. And there is some effort that you will need to do to migrate to that architecture, because you will basically have to do some rewrite in your solution to go from there. So it's not a standard Sitecore break that you would do. So I'd like to cover some of the migration challenges that you might want to look at, take into account if you're doing this migration. So first thing first, because Sitecore will be in the cloud, it's the only way to serialize the content that's supported at the moment is Sitecore serialization format. So Unicorn and TDS, I know a lot of projects uses Unicorn or TDS. It wouldn't be supported. So you need to migrate all your serialized content into the format which is supported by XM Cloud. It also, another thing to consider, there is no upgrade path for database. So if you have a database full of content, you cannot just run an upgrade script and reuse that database. You have to actually take the content from that database and migrate that to XM Cloud. Also, Sitecore XM Cloud doesn't support existing modules. It's all in the SaaS. You cannot just install a module and expect that it will work as you do with your current XM. Not all functionality is supported. Like some modules, you would extend the pipeline you have for request processing, but with XM Cloud, you don't have CD servers, so this module wouldn't be supported. So basically, some of the modules wouldn't just work. So one of them is like Sitecore Forms. You wouldn't be able to do Sitecore Forms with XM Cloud. You have to use some SaaS Sitecore supported integration to do the forms.
Okay. So in SUGCon Europe,
yeah,
they just released that XM Cloud will support Sitecore Forms from end of this year.
Right.
So hopefully that's a new thing they are bringing in XM Cloud, and we don't know what it will be, how good it will be, or bad it will be, but yeah, it's coming up.
So does that mean you don't need Sitecore Send?
Sitecore Send is more like email marketing. Even forms in there is very small. Like it's very basic functionality there. You can't even create a phone number field, for example. It's that basic.
Yeah.
You can have simple forms filled in there. Hopefully this one is more advanced when they come up with XM Cloud.
Yeah. So it's very fresh product. So that Sitecore is trying to make the migration, easy for us to support some most popular functionality. But some things would be deprecated, like commerce, for example. If you're using Sitecore Commerce, it would no longer be supported. So Sitecore has Order Cloud, which is like a replacement, like a headless commerce alternative. And then other modules like redirect module, sitemap module. Again, you have to rewrite your application for that functionality, because these modules wouldn't work just out of out of the box for Sitecore XM Cloud because it has totally different architecture compared to standard Monolith Sitecore. Another challenge is like GSS, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a React way to build websites on Sitecore, but with XM Cloud, the preferred way is to use GSS to build all the sites. So if you have some website which is built on MVC, you will have to migrate that website to be hosted on XM Cloud. So that will be a big chunk of work. But Sitecore provides some way to migrate that. So you have a layout service which basically allows you to use some chunks of your MVC code and then display it statically during the static build, render that component, and then use that in your website. But again, there are some limitations. If there is some personalization there on that component, it wouldn't work. Then if there is some dynamic stuff there, it wouldn't probably work as well. So there would be some amount of rewrite you will have to do to migrate your MVC website into the XM Cloud world. Then again, with GSS, it's also a change to how teams are structured with the development. So it's actually more a benefit than a challenge probably, because like you will have more focus on front end than back end. You will have more front end developers in a team because most of the GSS development is done in front end. It's basically React wrapper around Sitecore. So with GSS, most of your source code would be React code, which will connect to Sitecore through GraphQL and some APIs that you will have through React. So most of your teams would be front-end developers who will use Sitecore content, and you probably have one or two Sitecore backends who manage Sitecore and more manage like Sitecore infrastructure and Sitecore, some Sitecore APIs that wouldn't be covered by GraphQL endpoint. Another challenge is personalization. With XM Cloud, the standard personalization you have in Sitecore wouldn't be supported. So instead, Sitecore provides Sitecore Personalized, which is a separate SaaS product. So it's very similar, I think, by the way it works is to how Google Optimized works. It's kind of you can have your Java personalization done on the JavaScript side, and, but it's a separate product, which means if you've done some personalization, especially on some custom personalization rules, it wouldn't be supported in XM Cloud. And then again, with XM Cloud, most of your code for the website would be done through GSS. So your front end on logic would be done on GSS, which will retrieve the content from GraphQL endpoints. And that means that it is recommended to minimize the amount of code you push into your XM Cloud instance. So it would be mostly like if you have a custom code, it would be very minimized, more like if you have like custom fields, yeah, you can do custom fields with XM Cloud, or more like content, like template structure. That's something you customize. But then if you have some custom pipelines for requests, then recommended way is to use webhooks. So there's a number of webhooks that you can integrate. And this is recommended way to extend your CMS instance. And then also think about your Sitecore search. So if you have a standard Sitecore instance, most of you probably used Sitecore indexes that are provided by Sitecore over there, like web index or master index. And so this is being replaced as well. So now there is a separate integrations with Sitecore from popular search providers like Algolia or Coveo or SearchStack. But the way you use search APIs is now more like you query directly to that search providers instead of using Sitecore APIs.
Jack, we also have Sitecore search.
Yeah.
We also have Sitecore search in the list.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's, I think, yeah, so it's very probably similar to, yeah.
12 we are following.
Yeah.
Composable product.
Yeah, so yeah, again, this is like following a composable pattern instead of, fitting all the functionality inside of one product, integrate with another provider, and delegate responsibility for that to them. And then also with XM Cloud, there is more reliance on Docker. So if you're a backend developer and if you are going to develop stuff for XM Cloud, you have to know Docker. There is no other way to build that. So if you haven't used Docker yet, this is the recommended way. So backend developers must be proficient. The front-end developers, they can use edge endpoints from XM Cloud, so they actually can develop stuff without Docker if they want to. There is a local development instance that Sitecore provides for developers, so they can develop stuff without actually connecting to the actual instance on the SaaS, like on XM Cloud. And then you can also deploy some customization to XM Cloud instance. And the way how it works is that you basically have a GitHub repository. So I'll just try to find example. This one is his assignment. Yeah, this one. So this is an example of how the integration with XM Cloud works. So you have your repository with your Docker Compose, and then you have Docker files for your XM instance over here in the build, and yet you can build on top of base image that you are provided by Sitecore by adding some additional integrations and resources and DLLs. And then when you go to XM Cloud, on every it integrates with that repository, and on every commit you do, it will redeploy that instance into the XM Cloud and build that Docker image and use it for XM CMS. So this is just an example. So I did a commit here, and it will do the build and build that Docker file and deploy that to XM Cloud. And finally, Sitecore CLI. This is another tool that you might want to use if you're building for XM Cloud. So because you're not managing Sitecore as a product, you need some tools to manage it through the through XM Cloud, and this XM Cloud provides an API for that, which is Sitecore CLI, which is like a command line tool that you can use to log into XM Cloud and do the serialization, manage search, do the publishing, deployment, and this is something that you can use from your CI/CD server, so that to basically do the deployments and do the publishing, indexes, and all stuff. So to summarize, XM Cloud allows you to get a more efficient, more faster solution with less costs. So there are a lot of long-term tangible benefits that you can do by migrating to XM Cloud, but it also comes with some commitment that you can do. You should invest into the upgrade. So another take is that if you are already on a version 10 and higher, if you already invested into the GSS, then this upgrade process will probably take much less time. So this is part for questions.
Yeah. I was wondering, Jake, I asked Sitecore specifically, do you have any extensions in XM Cloud? And they said no, very direct no. But do you think in the future would they enable that? Like if we want to build translator extension or any extension built into the XM Cloud, would we be able to?
What they are saying is that maybe check.
Yeah.
Yeah, we email extension like to CMS itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand the webhook, so I envision it. It would be something like Shopify extensions, where you have the webhooks and you have to host your extension separately, your own, and then have the Sitecore giving you the webhooks or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure webhook will cover all functionality that could be extension,
Right.
but you can customize your CMS instance. So if you think like translation, I think theoretically you still can do a lot of customization to CMS, but the way it's done is through Docker. So you can customize your base image with your additional on top.
Right, but if I'm a company and want to kind of promote the extension for people to install, like Shopify does again, and pay for the extension and whatever, I wouldn't be able to simply sell it, right?
I mean, originally with Sitecore, the product, you had a way to install package, which probably, I think that's what you mean.
Yeah.
With XM Cloud, I think not all packages are supported, but there is still a way to install package. But to be honest, I don't know if how much whether you can still like do a package to basically just do some custom fields and stuff.
Yeah, right.
So ideally, everything they are recommending webhooks.
Yeah.
Okay. You can still put your .NET code files in there, but packages is not allowed to be put in XM Cloud. That's not the ideal way as well, because they will. You don't want to customize too much, because in future, what if they change a few functionality in XM Cloud? It's a SaaS software, right?
True.
You can't just put your .NET. Imagine they rebuild the whole platform in future after 5 years from .NET platforms to like .NET Core, for example. You lose all the functionality, so you don't want to do that too.
Yeah, but the webhooks is not mature yet, it seems like, for that kind of thing.
There's probably another option you could explore as well, because if you think about the packages, that was the old legacy way of installing, additional modules on Sitecore. That's gone with the Docker implementation before XM Cloud.
Yeah.
So you need to get a new module created and your own Docker images created for any modules that you want to have, and because we can also customize what's being deployed there, as long as it's a functionality within CMS which you want to extend, then that's an option you can explore.
Yeah, and also like think about that you might have multiple environments.
Yeah.
So like installing package, it's really hard to manage to have environment consistent between each other. While with Docker, while you build the image once, it is deployed to all environments the same. So you're sure that all your environments have the same source code and modules and stuff. So this is much gets you more confidence.
And the same problem will come also with Covio connector, right? So once we go to XM Cloud, then Covio Sitecore connector, because end of the day they are packages.
Yes.
So maybe we'll need to switch to some sitemap connector or something.
So I talked with Covio guys for this, and what they said was, Covio connector doesn't exist in XM Cloud, first of all.
Yeah.
So you have to either use Covio's functionality where it comes to your XM Cloud and pinches data every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or the second way is to webhook, connect a webhook. When something publishes, you go and publish to Covio.
Yeah. Well, Sitecore is also similar, right? Sitemap in the Sitecore.
Yeah. And by the way, the edge currently work exactly that way. It have webhooks and it listen to it, and then when you publish
it,
So Sitecore haven't said anything about like a marketplace for editions or anything like that yet.
I think they'll never do that, right? Because that's what they want to get away with, customizing Sitecore. means more management for them, right?
Yeah, that's probably true.
Because the whole point about composable,
right, they could upgrade whenever they want.
the point about composable is to have a product like Contentful, which is just that product, and then what you want to connect, you do it on a separate environment, not on their platform, I guess.
Jack, you mentioned about hosting. We talked about wholesale for Next.js, yeah? We explored any other options where we could host the front end?
I think the most popular at the moment is Versa, obviously, Netlify. Netlify is another provider which is very similar to Versa in terms of functionality. They have same services that Versa does. And then you can also, if you want, you can host on Next.js. You can host on Azure and AWS. I mean, yeah. So it's also an option. You can do Node.js host that will host in Next.js. So it's not a problem.
Problem with Azure hosting is you have to worry about revalidating cache and all by yourself.
Yeah.
With Netlify and Versa, they do your Next.js revalidating of cache.
Yeah.
So it's ideal. Versa is the best, or Netlify is good.
Yeah. You're right with this. So it's actually we have one customer where we have hosted in Azure. So actually there are kind of pros and cons both. Because with there, if you go, you have to think of number of calls going, price going up and down. But yeah, at end of the day, if you go with Versa, they want to manage everything, right? For cache invalidation. But versus Azure, you have to make sure how you're going to invalidate cache.
So with your Azure, did you find that cache validation and
Yeah,
all that?
that is,
because you have to do by yourself, right? You have to
handle
delete that
everything.
folder by yourself when something publishes.
Yeah.
Because there's an output folder which needs to be cleared.
Another one, you mentioned about GitHub for the source code, right?
Yeah.
Explore other options in terms of GitHub has integration with XM Cloud directly. What if a company doesn't want to use GitHub?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't actually seen on anything else.
I think a couple of blogs
Well,
have been in this.
yeah.
Like these folks who have not used GitHub, something else.
Well, XM Cloud does support
Mm.
any source control, right? It's not limited to GitHub, but the deploy app that we saw that you showed earlier, where you can actually go and trigger the deployment from the GitHub check-ins, or it can be automatic, or we can go and trigger it manually.
Right.
That's supported only by GitHub though. Or any other source control provider, we have to depend on Sitecore CLI, which is one of the benefits you covered as well, right? The deployment option for Sitecore CLI. So yeah, everything would go from that. And CLI is really powerful as well. You don't need to log into XM Cloud to do anything. You can actually create your environment project. You can deploy, do everything from Sitecore CLI.
I had a question. You mentioned there was GraphQL involved with the new upgrade.
Yep.
Is there a whole lot of setup to migrate onto a GraphQL system, or is it integrated into the Sitecore?
So with GSS, you basically have like accelerator framework that you use that you can connect to your Sitecore instance, and you can do the mapping with fields. So it's very similar to kind of you basically do a component. You say I want to show these fields over here, and GSS will automatically use GraphQL to query them. But if you want to do more custom stuff like I don't know, then like adding content and stuff like that, then you will have to directly query the GraphQL then.
Check. So in this, for example, in the SaaS-based approach, we will be able to do the Sitecore item service as it is, like it's going to have any impact on it, or it will be like we can still use it Sitecore as item service. Like in my previous project, like they were like, for example, you ask something from Alexa, and then your company is exposing the data using the Sitecore item service.
Right.
So are we still going? Can we do that? Like just theoretically?
I don't know.
It will be done in Next.js as an API or something.
So in JSS setup,
all of that would get replaced by Edge. So Edge becomes your first point of contact, right? You're not directly talking with Sitecore, but you're talking to Edge, and again, the query will be through GraphQL. And it's the output you would get from GraphQL queries would be similar to the output you will get from the layout service in terms of the format, etc. Plus, you will have options to customize it further.
But would we let a third-party system like Alexa touch our edge endpoint, or would we ask them to go to Next.js first and then Next.js software?
Next.js is just a front-end hosting layer. If you create a new edge key for a specific third-party system, they can directly talk to the edge. Because it's a CDN, it's one of the benefits. You don't have to get all the requests directly to your front-end application system because you're effectively reducing all those costs and requests coming in, right? So, yeah.
Just to be clear, so means Edge supports only GraphQL query, right?
Yeah.
No
correct.
rest, nothing.
Okay.
GraphQL.
Yeah.
Correct.
And one of the reasons why we wanted to use GraphQL is like compared with the standard REST API, GraphQL is more like a query language. So you can, if you write a query once, you don't have to rewrite your code later. If you want to change it, you can just change your query, and then you can also batch queries. So like imagine if you have a REST API, which gets one item, and then you want to get another item, and then you want to get like 5 more items, then it would be like basically 5 calls. With GraphQL, you can batch all these 5 calls together and return them as one call. So this is a big improvement. So, and then you also have mutations as well, which is basically you can add, remove content through GraphQL query. So this is basically one endpoint which will serve all the different operations you can have on your CMS.
Jack, assuming we don't have Sitecore Search or Algolia or any of the other third-party search providers, if we want to implement Sitecore Search, how matured is the Experience Edge GraphQL KPIs? Is there any downside to depending on Experience Edge for pure site search?
Yeah, I think you can do basic search operations on GraphQL. I think for full text search you need to use some only or some search provider like Sitecore Search or something.
Yeah. So to answer that, the Edge server itself doesn't have index and doesn't talk to Sitecore indexes. It's not really mature yet to handle that, so your search query will probably hit the normal GraphQL queries, will hit the normal database, it wouldn't hit any indexes. So it should be working, but not under an index. It will be very slow, be heavy on the server. Yeah.
So the recommendation is to have one of them.
To have one of those, at least at the minute, because I know for sure Edge at the minute doesn't support indexes and doesn't have indexes.
Okay. One more question. Is there any limitation to how many calls you can make to Edge?
How many calls?
Like, is it like unlimited API calls onto Edge, or is usually does license limit you from within number of calls?
Probably depending on the license, but yeah, I think something Sitecore to confirm. Yeah.
But from your experience, have you seen any sort of limitations to?
No, because every call from Next.js for every component will have to go through Edge. Yeah. Okay, not for the static pages which are already created on Next.js and hosted, but for any server-side rendering parts which get evaluated every time, so all of them go to Next.js, so to Edge. So yeah, haven't seen any limitations until now, but yeah, there could be, or there could be cost implications as such.
Yeah. Yeah, but basically I think what Edge does, because a lot of stuff happens on the build time, so basically theoretically Edge calls should be very simple in terms of just serving you this prepared already JSON. So I think there is a lot of caching happens there that it should be quite enough to.
Yeah, it's a CDN, right? So
Yeah,
you
it's basically
expect
a
all the next results to come from the cache rather than
Yeah.
going back to an edge at all.
Yep.
You mentioned that one of your challenges there is no direct way to upgrade the DB. So how do you assess there? Like, you just fully migrate your content. So how do you migrate contents?
We haven't got to the part yet, but
You do with Sitecore serialization.
Yeah.
So you in your local, you put all the serialized files, just like you do with Unicorn TDS, deploy in your GitHub, and that will go to XML Cloud and it will populate all the site tree.
so that's for your developer items. And then for your content items, again, you can either try to serialize them manually and then move it, or there is also a tool for Razor.
Even for content items, that is the only way to get it in Sitecore for the first time.
But there is also Razor, which is like a Sitecore tool, so you have to, you can use it to, and it supports XM Cloud as well. So you can, you have to pay license for it, but they say there is a way to use Razor to, it connects to your database and migrates items into the Sitecore XM Cloud database.
So if you want to do it the really hard way, then create
so it's
Sitecore
useful.
packages
So
and
is it Razor
install it as
supported
well.
out of box?
That's what I'm running this.
It's a really
So
hard
the
way.
source could be any Sitecore 10.x and description would be
Is that the
accepted.
case for media?
That's what I
Wow,
said.
it's awesome. Yeah, if that is the case.
Sitecore
Same
CLI.
thing in medium with
Yeah, yeah,
serialization.
yeah.
So even for media assets, you can basically
Any
serialize and then.
Serialize any content on Sitecore
CLI.
trace and then
Remember we
push
used
that
Razor for some time, some degrees
So
of
if
Razor.
that's the
parts,
case,
right?
any
So-
Sitecore version can go to cloud directly. No need to like,
from a content perspective, yeah.
yeah.
But from a Sitecore platform, the CMS platform perspective, we have to be on the latest version so that it's all headless. There's no MVC implementation anywhere within the XM Cloud. So yeah, that's the changes we need to do within our application, and it's one of the challenges we talked about.
I think the one big challenge would be to move content between their website and quality website, right? How are we gonna do that with no content packaging and those type of options?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, you could still use the Sitecore content packaging, but not a easy way, because depending on the volume of content we have, packages could be huge, and media library could be very heavy. But yeah, serialization is probably a better way compared to manually packaging it. But that needs to be a controlled activity where where that happens, the migration happens.
But right now, you know how you go in quality, take one about us page and put it in your local or in your dev environment. It's not that easy anymore to just go and quickly restore it.
For individual items, we can. Yeah. Like on the, Jack talked about the content editor. We saw from the cloud portal how we can go. We can also get into a desktop mode where we have the similar options of package designer, installation, and all this stuff, and partial. Basically, all the tools that we're used to years, and they've still retained it. Support might be limited, and or might get removed in the future, but at least it's all there as of now.
Did you try the package manager? I never played with that. Desktop is there, which is good. It feels like it's the same Excel, just hosted online.
Yeah. But yeah, the main challenges are extensions that we talked about, and we're dependent on what can be supported on XM Cloud. Yeah, there's no UI layer to it. We need to think about getting our Next.js things working as well for Experience Editor. So that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, it's more like a gradual process instead of just saying, oh, we're going to upgrade to XM Cloud and then do like a huge, like, I don't know, half a year project to do that. You can gradually upgrade your instance to kind of support GSS, support Sitecore serialization, so kind of make it process easier. So you have to plan ahead this upgrade.
Right on time, Jack. Awesome. Good.